Good afternoon, students. My name is Dr. Samuel Aku, and I'm taking you on this module this afternoon, talking about risk and risk management. In this module, risk management, pure and speculative risk, diversifiable risk and non-diversifiable risk, and the burden of risk shall be discussed. The objective of this module is as follows: that at the end of this course or this module, students are to 1. Understand the importance of managing risk in the business, understand the effects of pure and speculative risk, and then understand the benefits of managing risk. By way of introduction, according to Regda, risk is defined as uncertainty concerning the occurrence of a loss. What this means in essence is that if you are into any form of business, you must anticipate or expect that there could be possibility of loss or losses. That is the whole essence of what risk is all about. So risk is different from uncertainty in that the term risk is used in situations where the possibilities or where the probabilities of possible outcomes are known or can be estimated with some degree of accuracy, whereas uncertainty is used in situations where such probabilities cannot be estimated. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. You are now going to look at risk as different from uncertainty, to the point that risk, that is the probability of its happening, can be estimated with some degree of accuracy, whereas uncertainty is a situation where such probabilities cannot be estimated. So we'll quickly look at classification of risk. Risk can be classified into several distinct classes. The most important include the following: 1. Pure and speculative risk. 2. Diversifiable risk and non-diversifiable risk. 3. Enterprise risk. And 4. Systemic risk. Pure and speculative risk. Pure risk is defined as a situation in which there are only the possibilities of loss or no loss. Possibilities of loss or no loss. The only possible outcomes are adverse, that is loss, and neutral, no loss. That is either there is a loss or there is no loss. No loss. Examples of pure risk include premature death, job-related accidents, catastrophic medical expenses, and damage to property from fire, lightning, flood, or earthquake. These are all examples of pure risk. In contrast, speculative risk is defined as a situation in which either profit or loss is possible. either profit or loss is possible. That's speculative risk. For example, if you purchase 100 shares of common stock, you would profit if the price of the stock increases, but will lose if the price declines. Other examples of speculative risk include investing in real estate and going into business for yourself. In these situations, both profits and loss are possible. Both profits and loss are possible. And all kind of businesses, including purchase of land with anticipation of future appreciation, is speculative, because such is dependent on developments that come to such an area. Again, we look at diversifiable risk and non-diversifiable risk. Diversifiable risk is a risk that affects only individuals or small groups and not the entire economy. It is a risk that can be reduced or eliminated by diversification. Because diversifiable risk affects only specific individuals or small groups, it is also called non-systematic risk or particular risk. Examples include car thefts, robberies, and dwelling fires. Only individuals and business firms that experience such losses are affected, not the entire economy. In contrast, non-diversifiable risk is a risk that affects the entire economy or large numbers of persons or groups within the economy. It is a risk that cannot be eliminated or reduced by diversification. Examples include rapid inflation, cyclical unemployment, war, hurricanes, floods, and earthquakes, because large numbers of individuals or groups are affected. Because non-diversifiable risk affect the entire economy or large numbers of persons in the economy, it is also called fundamental risk. It is also called fundamental risk. Fundamental because it has great impact on large number of persons or group in the entire economy. So quickly want to also look at enterprise risk. By enterprise risk, we mean the term that encompasses all major risks faced by a business firm. Such risks include pure risk, speculative risk, strategic risk, operational risk, and financial risk. Meaning that all risk that can be seen or that are possible in an organization or an enterprise are inclusive in enterprise risk, just as we have given examples. We have already explained the meaning of pure and speculative risk. Strategic risk refers to uncertainty regarding the firm's financial goals and objectives. For example, if a firm enters a new line of business, the line may be unprofitable. Operational risk results from the firm's business operations. For example, A bank that offers online banking services may incur losses if hackers break into the bank's computer. Enterprise risk also includes financial risk, which is becoming more important in a commercial risk management program. Financial risk refers to the uncertainty of loss because of adverse changes in commodity prices, interest rates, foreign exchange rates, and the value of money. Enterprise risk is becoming more important in commercial risk management, which is a process that organizations use to identify and treat major and minor risk. In the evolution of commercial risk management, some risk managers are now considering all types of risk in one program. Enterprise risk management combines into a single unified treatment program all major risks faced by the firm. All major risks faced by the firm are put into one basket. So we also look at systemic risk. Systemic risk is the risk of collapse of an entire system or entire market due to the failure of a single entity or group of entities that can result in the breakdown of the entire financial system. The severe 2008 to 2009 business recession in the United States was the second worst economic downswing in US. Personal and commercial risk. Personal risks are risks that directly affect an individual or family. They involve the possibility of the loss or reduction of earned income, extra expenses, and the depletion of financial assets. Major personal risks that can cause great economic insecurity include the following: premature death, inadequate retirement income, poor health, and unemployment. What this is saying in essence is there may be a plan you have for the future, but when you die before that time, it's a risk. That's the premature death aspect. And also inadequate retirement income. For instance, you plan you are going to retire at so the age or time. There must be adequate income that you have to plan for, that will take care of your retirement age or time. So we look at also commercial risk. Business firms also face a wide variety of pure risk that can financially cripple or bankrupt the firm if a loss occurs. These risks include property risk, liability risk, loss of business income, cyber security and identity theft, and other risk. So burden of risk on society. The presence of risk results in certain undesirable social and economic effects. Risk entails three major burdens on society. Number one, the size of an emergency fund must be increased. 2. Society is deprived of certain goods and services. 3. Worry and fear are present. Worry and fear are present. Yes. Okay. Okay. So, larger emergency fund. It is prudent to set aside funds for an emergency. However, in the absence of insurance, individuals and business firms will have to increase substantially the size of their emergency fund to pay for unexpected losses. Loss of certain goods and services. A second burden of risk is that society is deprived of important goods and services. For example, because of the risk of liability, the risk of a liability lawsuit, many corporations have discontinued manufacturing certain products. Worry and fear. The final burden of risk is that of worry and fear. Numerous examples illustrate the mental unrest and fear caused by risk. Some passengers in a commercial jet may become extremely nervous and fearful if the jet encounters severe turbulence during the flight. Risk management. Risk management. Risk management is a process that identifies loss exposures faced by an organization. That is the exposures, avenues where loss could come in an organization, and select the most appropriate techniques for treating such exposures. Because the term risk is ambiguous and has different meanings, risk managers typically use the term loss exposure to identify potential losses. Objectives of risk management. What are the objectives, the imports of risk management? Risk management has important objectives. These objectives can be classified as follows: pre-loss objectives and post-loss objectives. Pre-loss objectives. Number 1, important objectives before a loss occurs include economy, reduction of anxiety, and meeting legal obligations. 2, the first objective means that the firm should prepare for potential losses in the most economical way. Number 3, the second objective is the reduction of anxiety, or to reduce anxiety. Certain loss exposures can cause greater worry and fear for the risk manager and key executives. For example, the threats of a catastrophic lawsuit because of a defective product can cause greater anxiety than a small loss from a minor fire. Number 4, the final objective is to meet any legal obligations. For example, government regulations may require a firm to install safety devices to protect workers from harm, to dispose of hazardous waste materials properly, and to label consumer products appropriately. Label consumer products appropriately. So post-loss objectives. Risk management, number one. Post-loss objectives, number one. Risk management also has certain objectives after a loss occurs. These objectives include survival of the firm, continued operations, stability of earnings, continued growth, and social responsibility. Number two, the most important post-loss objective is survival of the firm. Survival means that after a loss occurs, the firm can resume at least partial operations within some reasonable time period. Number three, the second post-loss objective is to continue operating. For some firms, the ability to operate after a loss is extremely important. For example, a public utility firm must continue to provide service. Banks, dairies, bakeries, and other competitive firms must continue to operate after a loss. Otherwise, business will be lost to competitors. Number four, the third post-loss objective is stability of earnings. Earnings per share can be maintained if the firm continues to operate. However, a firm may incur substantial additional expenses to achieve this goal, such as operating at another location, and perfect earnings stability may be difficult to attain. Number five, the fourth post-loss objective is continued growth of the firm. That is, if you have looked at continuing in business, being stable in business, then the next thing is continued growth of the firm. A company can grow by developing new products and markets, or by acquiring or merging with other companies. The risk manager must therefore consider the effects that a loss will have on the firm's ability to grow. Finally, number six, the objective of social responsibility is to minimize the effects that a loss will have on other persons and on society. A severe loss can adversely affect employees, suppliers, customers, investors, creditors, and the community in general. So, risk management techniques. Techniques for managing risk can be classified broadly as either risk control or risk financing. Risk control refers to techniques that reduce the frequency or severity of losses. Risk financing refers to techniques that provides for the funding of losses. Risk managers typically use a combination of techniques for treating each loss exposures. Risk control. Risk control. Risk control is a generic term to describe techniques for reducing the frequency or severity of losses. Major risk control techniques include the following: 1. Avoidance. 2. Loss prevention. Number 3. Loss reduction. And in doing that, you look duplication, separation, and diversification. Risk avoidance. Avoidance is one technique for managing risk. For example, you can avoid the risk of being mugged in a high crime area by staying away from high crime rate areas. You can avoid the risk of divorce by not marrying, and business firms can avoid the risk of being sued for a defective product by not producing the product. Risk management techniques continue. Not all risk should be avoided. However, for example, you can avoid the risk of death or disability in a plane crash by refusing to fly. But is this choice practical or desirable? The alternatives, driving or taking a bus or train, often are not appealing. Although the risk of a plane crash is present, the safety record of commercial airlines is excellent, and flying is a reasonable risk to assume. Loss prevention. Loss prevention is a technique that reduces the possibility of loss so that the frequency of losses is reduced. Several examples of personal loss prevention can be given. Auto accident can be reduced if motorists take a safe driving course and drive defensively. The number of heart attacks can be reduced if individuals control their weight, stop smoking, and eat healthy food or diet. Loss prevention is also important for business firms. For example, strict security measures at airports and aboard commercial flights can reduce acts of terrorism. Boiler explosions can be prevented by periodic inspections by safety engineers. Occupational accidents can be reduced by the elimination of unsafe working conditions and by strong enforcement of safety rules. And fires can be prevented by forbidding workers to smoke in a building where highly flammable materials are used. In short, the goal of loss prevention is to reduce the probability that losses will occur. To reduce the probability that losses will occur. Loss reduction. Strict loss prevention efforts can reduce the frequency of losses. However, some losses will inevitably occur. Thus, another objective of loss control is to reduce the severity of a loss after it occurs. For example, a department store can install a sprinkler system so that a fire will be promptly extinguished, thereby reducing the severity of loss. Duplication. Losses can be reduced by duplication. This technique refers to having backups or copies of important documents or property available in case a loss occurs. For example, backup copies of key business records, e.g. accounts receivable, are available in case the original records are lost or destroyed. Separation is another one. Another technique for reducing losses is separation. The assets exposed to loss are separated or divided to minimize the financial loss from a single event. For example, a manufacturer may store finished goods in 2 warehouses in different cities. If one warehouse is damaged or destroyed by fire, tornado, or other peril, the finished goods in the other warehouse are unharmed, and within the period where they will be able to, they will it will take them to be able to put up a re-emergence into production. The goods in the warehouse that are not affected can be given to customers. Diversification. Finally, losses can be reduced by diversification. This technique reduces the chance of loss by spreading the loss exposure across different parties. Risk is reduced if a manufacturer has a number of customers and suppliers. Risk financing. As stated earlier, risk financing refers to techniques that provide for the payment of losses after they occur. Payment for losses after they occur. Major risk financing techniques include the following: 1. Retention. 2. Non-insurance transfers. Number 3. Insurance. So, retention. Retention is an important technique for managing risk. Retention means that an individual or a business firm retain part of all of the losses that can result from a given risk. Risk retention can be active or passive. Active risk retention means that an individual is consciously aware of the risk and deliberately plans to retain all or part of it. For example, a motorist may wish to retain the risk of a small collision loss by purchasing an auto insurance policy with a $500, or as in the case of Nigeria now, 5,000 naira for third-party insurance, or higher deductible. Risk can also be retained passively. Like certain risk can be unknowingly retained because of ignorance, indifference, laziness, or failure to identify an important risk. Passive retention is very dangerous if the risk retained has the potential for financial ruin. For example, many workers with earned incomes are not insured against the risk of total or permanent disability. Self-insurance. The discussion of retention will not be complete without a brief discussion of self-insurance. Self-insurance is a special form of planned retention by which part or all of a given loss exposure is retained by the firm. Another name for self-insurance is self-funding, which expresses more clearly the idea that losses are funded and paid for by the firm. For example, a large corporation may self-insure or fund part or all of the group health insurance benefits paid to employees. Non-insurance transfers. Hello, who is this?
Okay, this is the Sister Adama Francis.
I can't talk now, I'm in the studio recording. I'll call you back.
All right.
Non-insurance transfers. Non-insurance transfers are another technique for managing risk. The risk is transferred to a party other than an insurance company. The risk can be transferred by several methods, including transfer of risk by contracts, hedging, number 2, hedging price risk, and number 3, incorporation of a business firm. Transfer of risk by contracts. undesirable risk can be transferred by contracts. For example, the risk of a defective television or stereo set can be transferred to the retailer by purchasing a service contract, which makes the retailer responsible for all repairs after the warranty expires. Hedging price risk. Hedging price risk is another example of risk transfer. Hedging is a technique for transferring the risk of unfavorable price fluctuations to a speculator by purchasing and selling futures as futures contracts on an organized exchange. That is, what you are anticipating that will happen in the future, you can insure against it. That is what we call hedging. Incorporation of a business firm. Incorporation is another example of risk transfer. If a firm is a sole proprietorship, the owner's personal assets can be attached by creditors for satisfaction of debts. If a firm incorporates, personal assets cannot be attached by creditors for payment of the firm's debts. In essence, by incorporation, the liability of the stockholders is limited, and the risk of the firm having insufficient assets to pay business debt is shifted to the creditors. Insurance. For most people, insurance is the most practical method for dealing with major risk. Although private insurance has several characteristics, three major characteristics should be emphasized. First, risk transfer is used because a pure risk is transferred to the insurer. Second, the pooling technique is used to spread the losses of the few over the entire group so that average loss is substituted for actual loss. Finally, the risk may be reduced by application of the law of large numbers, by which an insurer can predict future loss experience with greater accuracy. I don't know if we understand all we are trying to drive from this lecture. So, steps in the risk management process. In risk management process, there are steps to be followed. That is the step-by-step that you follow in managing risk. Step 1, you first identify loss exposures. Identify loss exposures. The first step in the risk management process is to identify all major and minor loss exposures. This step involves an exhaustive review of all potential losses. Then we go to step 2, which measure and analyze the loss exposures. It measure and analyze the loss exposures. After you have identified loss exposures, you measure and analyze it to see the extent of what you are looking at. So the second step is to measure and analyze the loss exposures. It is important to measure and identify the loss exposures in order to manage them properly. This step requires an estimation of the frequency and severity of loss. Loss frequency refers to the probable number of losses that may occur during some given time period. Loss severity refers to the probable size of the losses that may occur. So step 3 will be to select the appropriate combination of techniques for treating the loss exposures. So the third step in the risk management process is to select the appropriate combination of techniques for treating the loss exposures. These techniques can be classified broadly as either risk control or risk financing. Risk control refers to techniques that reduce the frequency or severity of the losses. Risk financing refers to techniques that provide for the funding of the losses. Risk managers typically use a combination of techniques for treating each loss exposures. This step in risk management must be closely studied for proper understanding and adoption. Step 4. Implement and monitor the risk management program. At this point, we have discussed 3 of the 4 steps in the risk management process. The first step is to implement and monitor the risk management program. This step begins with a policy statement. A risk management policy statement is necessary to have an effective risk management program. This statement outlines the risk management objectives of the firm as well as company policy with respect to treatment of loss exposures. It also educates top level executives in regard to the risk management process, establishes the importance, role, and authority of the risk manager, and provides standards for judging the risk manager's performance. Benefits of risk management. Why are we talking about risk management? It's because there are benefits of it for purpose of continuity in organization. So we'll quickly look at the major benefits of risk management, which includes the following. A formal risk management program enables a firm to attain its pre-loss and post-loss objectives more easily. B, the costs of risk is reduced, which may increase the company's profits. The cost of risk is a risk management tool that measures the costs associated with treating the organization's loss exposures. These costs include insurance premiums paid, retained losses, loss control expenditures, outside risk management services, financial guarantees, internal administrative costs, and taxes, fees, and other relevant expenses. C, because the adverse financial impact of pure loss exposures is reduced, a firm may be able to implement an enterprise risk management program that treats both pure and speculative loss exposures. D, society also benefits since both direct and indirect, that is consequential losses, are reduced. As a result, pain and suffering are reduced. So thank you.